Hey folks, Rudros here, and with it being the week before the first Materia Cup of the 2024 season, just right around the corner in Kansas City, I thought I would come on here and give a few helpful tournament tips, probably mainly for new players. I'm sure a lot of veterans know these already, but maybe you'll get something out of it as well. But yeah, so let's say you're new to this and you haven't really gone to an in-person tournament before. I thought some of these things could be helpful. I will be at the Kansas City tournament, so if you see me there, feel free to stop by, say hello. Happy to always meet folks. Wish everyone going good luck, of course, and hope they do well. So here's 8 helpful tips just to kind of help prep yourself for a tournament environment, what it's like, etc. Let's start. So our first tip is know why you are going. To put it more succinctly, are you playing to win or are you playing for fun? That is the first question I ask anyone when they ask me for deck advice, and I've already had some people reach out to me about this season. Hey, what decks are you considering? What would you run? Do you have any suggestions for me? And that's the very first thing I always ask. Okay, well, are you playing to win or are you playing to have fun? Because if you're playing to have fun, you can ignore most of the other tips on this list. I mean, you should still listen to them anyway, but if you're just playing to have a good time, you just want to show up, spend time with your friends, jam cardboard, then you honestly have the easy job. Take whatever deck you enjoy. Even if it's a deck that's going to go 0-7, 0-8, get absolutely crushed, who cares? If you have fun doing it and you're there to have fun, then it doesn't really matter. If you're playing to win, then yes, you should be looking at meta decks. You know, if you can break the meta and find something that no one else has thought of, which is difficult to do, but if you're able to, awesome, bring that. But whatever you're bringing, make sure it is tried and true, make sure it is tested, make sure it has a good win rate. You know, that's kind of a key if you're planning to win. But if you're having fun, man, I envy you, because I would love to go to one of these and just play to have fun. I always personally want to do well, so good on you. Tip number 2 is physically prepare yourself. As much as you are able to, get yourself a good night's sleep the night before a tournament. Every night before a tournament, of course, I'm up testing, running decks. And I remember when we prepared for Winter Cup, I had to make a hard cutoff at, midnight or 12:30 or 1 p.m., whatever it was that I thought I needed to go to bed to get enough sleep. And I think some of my friends still stayed up testing, and that's their choice. Do what works for you. If you think you're going to be fine off of 3 hours of sleep, awesome. I know I would feel miserable all day. So for me, whether I'm feeling the deck or not, I make a hard cutoff. Hey, it's this time, I got to go to bed. And it's usually, kind of a restless sleep anyway. I'm usually thinking about the game and I'm nervous. Bring yourself a water bottle to the tournament, or make sure they have water to purchase or a drinking fountain. Keep yourself hydrated. Bring yourself snacks. These days can be very long. They can be long even when everything goes smoothly. Often things don't. Sometimes there's repairs. Sometimes there's delays and issues. So bring, a snack for yourself. Make sure you have water. Make sure you're going to the bathroom regularly. Make sure that before you go to the tournament, you get up early enough to eat breakfast or whatever. Keep yourself in good spirits. Hygiene is also important. Again, I don't want to be anyone's nanny, but you're going to be in a crowded room with a lot of people being very close. A lot of times these are in the summer, in the spring, it's very hot. So, take care of yourself, wear deodorant, shower. You're doing yourself a favor as well as everybody else. And another important thing, if you're able to, make a deck list ahead of time. If you can get someone to print one off for you, or maybe you can get one from the store the night before, make that deck list ahead of time. Or if you can and you need to use one from the store, which they should be supplying one for you, unless they've made it very clear ahead of time you have to have your own, get to the store a little early to fill out your deck list. I've seen a lot of tournaments where people will show up at the last second, right when we have to start. They haven't filled out a deck list, so they delay everybody by sitting there and slowly making out their deck list. So the more I'm a planner, I'm a prepper, so the more you've got done ahead of time, just the less you have to worry about on the tournament day, which is awesome. Now, number 3, I'm not personally as much of a stickler on, but there are people who are, and that is your card sleeves. I would recommend you have relatively fresh card sleeves. I don't think you have to buy brand new ones the day of. And so there's, they haven't even kind of broken in a little yet. I really like Dragon Shield, and I think the newest I've gotten them is I've gotten them a week before a tournament, and then I've used them to practice that week. Yeah, I don't want them to be so new that they still kind of have that slippery stickiness to them. Again, I'm not as huge of a stickler on this, but we've seen I think we saw on stream at Worlds, I believe it was Hunter there was something with one of his sleeves. I couldn't see it through the commentary window, but maybe there was a nick on one of them or there were marks. So if you have sleeves that are beat up, that are really, really well used, consider getting some new ones for that day, just because there are some people who will call you on that. They want to make sure you're not cheating, that, hey, that sleeve clearly has a bent corner. There's a big scuff mark on the back, and you could know, oh, well, I know what card that is. So the last thing you want is in the middle of the tournament to be stopped and delayed by, now I have to re-sleeve my entire deck because my opponent, got called on. Again, as long as they're relatively new, I'm not saying they have to be brand new that day, but you'd be doing yourself a favor to make sure they are at least in good condition. Sleeves in general are a good thing. They help protect your cards. They tend to make them easier to shuffle. So I think they even may have said in the official rules that you need to be sleeving your cards because the new Limit Break deck, those have to be different set of sleeves than what your main deck is. So make sure that as well. Make sure those 8 cards are not the same sleeves as you have. Again, these are just things, if you've thought about them ahead of time, if you prepared ahead of time, they're not a big deal at all, but you don't want the day of the tournament, especially if you're new and you're feeling nervous and overwhelmed as is, to suddenly have this sleeving fiasco where you have to go through your entire deck again. That's a big pain. Number 4, and we're going to get into some of the etiquette here. I am huge on respecting other people's property and other people's cards. So when you are handing your deck to your opponent, or you're taking your opponent's cards, be respectful of those cards. Treat them so well. Don't sit there and smash them together when you're shuffling. Don't smash them on the table when you want to see their break zone. I prefer, technically you have a right to see it, but don't just snatch it up and grab it. Just say, hey, can I please see your break zone? And if someone doesn't want you to touch their cards, obviously you kind of have to for shuffling or cutting, but let's say there's a card A, I don't know what that says, and the person, it's a full art, they want to be careful of it, and they turn it to you, or they want to hold it themselves, you just be mindful of that, be respectful. As long as they're not preventing you from taking in any information, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I always treat my opponent's cards very carefully, very delicately. I hope they treat mine that way as well. Yeah, don't just snatch cards off the table and say, what does this do? Be polite. Be like, hey, may I please read that? And of course, when your opponent is respectful of you in that way, return that favor. That, yeah, here you go. I'll happily, or if you're nervous about them touching, yeah, here, I'll turn it towards you. I'd prefer if you didn't touch it as much as possible. That's fine. Just be cognizant, treat people's stuff with care and dignity. A lot of people, I'm not a foil guy. I know some people like I guess is it a bragging right or a swag thing that, oh, my entire deck's foil. Look at this bling. I don't care about that. I honestly don't really like foils because they tend to bend and fold, which I don't care for. So most of my deck is non-foil if I can help it. But a lot of these decks are foils, and some of them are expensive foils and full art. So just be respectful, be polite about that. Handle each other's cards and equipment and property with care. Number 5, which will seem insanely obvious, but it's true, and that's practice. Whatever you're taking, whatever deck you're playing, practice with it. I did a tournament almost a year ago now. Wow, crazy. Maybe it was a full year ago now. And I switched to a deck at the last minute that I hadn't really practiced with. I changed it. I changed this whole style. And I did really poorly with it the next day, making terrible misplays. And for me, a misplay is not you could have done 1 or 2 things, and then in hindsight, option B was actually better than option A. I don't think that's a misplay. I think that's just you making a choice, a judgment error. A misplay is you put out the mercenary 6-cost cloud without an avalanche operative forward beforehand to trigger his effect. Oops, now I paid 6 for nothing. That's a misplay. And I did that in that tournament. I was playing with the new Stooge cards that had just come out in Opus, 19? And I wasn't familiar with them, and I went for the big 3 Stooge play, and I didn't have the one in hand that I needed to do it. So I just put 2 of them on the field, couldn't get the third one because I messed it up, and I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? But I hadn't practiced with it. I hadn't gotten into a routine and knowing the lines of it. So that is important. I'll be honest, I don't even know what I'm playing next weekend, which kind of worries me, but I've been very busy and overwhelmed with real life stuff as well as work lately. So I might be sloppy next week, and partly because I just haven't had the time to practice. So I'm telling myself, practice. Also, if your deck has particular rulings about it, know what those rulings are. So for example, if you're playing Galuf, I think he's Opus 18 legend, the one that when he attacks, he deals something damage equal to his power. Okay, very common cards in the meta are Yuzuki and Rydia, which have protection effects. Does Galoof work on those cards? You should know that. You should know that ahead of time. So again, if you come in against it in the tournament, you don't have to pause and go, wait, hold on, I need a judge ruling for this because I don't even know if this interaction works. That might change the difference between you playing the card out or pitching it for CP if you know, okay, yes, I know that interaction works. So if you have cards with specific interactions that can be weird, know how those interactions work. If you're playing a deck with Go-Go, I played a lot of 6. Does Go-Go work with Edgar, with Sabin? And if so, how? How does that stack work? I've gotten a lot of players in person where they're used to kind of just quickly going through the motions, and then when I ask, well, how are you stacking that? Like Axstar is a big one because he has 3 triggers that go off at once. And to be like, hold on, you have to choose a target when that goes on the stack. You can't decide that later. And that could matter in a match. So just, if you have complicated cards like that, just be familiar with them, know what you're doing. Again, the more knowledge you have in advance, the better off you're going to do the day of, and the less you're going to have to worry about. So practice makes perfect. All right, number 6 we are up to now. Be adaptable. If you want to be a successful card player, this is one of the best pieces of advice I can give to someone if you're trying to do well and you're trying to win. Be able to adapt to what your opponent does. When I'm teaching a lot of new players, probably the most common thing I see is they will get a game plan in their head and, okay, I must do that game plan at all times, and I always do that. And some decks are meant to do that, right? If you're playing Don Corneo, Ruggagine aggro, or you're playing Mono Ice discard aggro, yes, you want to go fast. That is the only way your deck succeeds. There is no world where you taking 3-4 turns off to set up and then try to discard your opponent is going to work because your deck isn't built for that. But if you look at the Materia Cup from last year, I think it was in Texas, and the finals was Emmanuel Anote. I think he was on Mono Water versus Sam Toole, and he was on Ice Wind. Mono Water is a very good mid-range deck and has really strong late-game power, but not against Ice Wind or Mono Wind, a wind variant. And in that matchup, Emmanuel, who normally would always get his backups and setup, completely abandoned that plan and just went as fast as he could to try to beat Sam before he got set up, which was the right call. Now, it didn't work out. Sam was still able to stabilize, but that was still the right call because he knows in no world can I play the normal mono water game, take my time, and beat this deck. It's just not going to happen. So if your deck has that ability, if you're playing Ice Lightning is a great example. Ice Lightning can usually go pretty fast aggro, and it can play a more mid-range game. And if you're seeing they're also on aggro, maybe you need to mid-range to just stop their aggro and then stabilize and then come back. But if you're going against Mono Wind or some deck with insane late game potential, then yeah, okay, I need to step on the gas. So being able to adapt to different decks, different situations is really helpful and will make you very successful. Yes, it requires you know a lot of cards and a lot of matchups so that you can see cards, or if you get the chance to see the deck list beforehand, like if you're in Top Cut, okay, yes, I can beat this early. No, I can't beat it late. However it is. So just being able to adapt to that game plan. I'm a guy who loves my backups, but you know what? I know I'm going to run into people who are going to force me to go, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to set up my backups and wait. I need to just blast them as soon as I can. So be adaptable. Number 7, which I would highly, highly recommend, you need to be cognizant of the time limit. And when you're practicing, you should practice with the 30-minute time limit, which is usually very common. See how long you're taking on your turns. If you're taking over 3 minutes per turn, you're going to eat up a lot of that clock. And you need to practice it. I've had too many games where people aren't actually keeping track of the time limit, not in official tournaments, locals, or online play. And somehow what should be a 30-minute match goes into nearly an hour. That's not good, and that's not going to do you well in a tournament, particularly if you're playing a mid-range or a control deck, a late-game setup deck. If you're playing aggro, usually you won't have to worry about this, but if you're playing those longer decks, deck that can go to deck out, practice with the time limit. You need to make sure you're under that 30-minute time limit. You need to know what the time rules are. What happens if you run out of time and the game still isn't decided? Do you know how the turns work? Do you know how many they work? Are you in the top cut where sudden death matters? So be aware of all that. Maybe that's a factor in taking the deck you take. A lot of players like to play aggro at these tournaments simply because even if the deck isn't amazing, they don't have to spend so much time at the table. And I personally find it exhausting if I'm playing control and I'm going to time every round, and now I get no break in between rounds to get up, stretch, get some water, go say hi to someone, just detox from the last game, reset my mind, and I just have to jump right into the next game. That can get very exhausting. So maybe that goes into your deck building decision that, hey, I don't want to risk going to time all the time, so I'm going to be playing aggressively. Also, do not be afraid to keep your opponent honest on this. That I get it. Sometimes, one, there's some slow players. Two, we need the time to think about turns. And that's okay. It's okay to take that time as long as it's not making you go to time. So keep an eye on that clock. Usually when I pass the turn, I'll kind of check the clock every turn just to see how we're doing. And if I feel like my opponent is taking a very long time, it's okay to say, can you please, play more quickly? You can be polite about it. You don't have to yell at them. And if it seems like it's becoming an issue, you can ask for a judge and, say, look, I feel like he's playing very slowly here and I don't want to run into time. And that's okay. Yeah, you shouldn't be punished because someone else is playing slowly. So I know that can feel intimidating to do it. But again, you don't have to yell at anyone. Just politely, hey, would you please play more quickly? At Disney Lorcana lately, I remember I played against a guy who was playing so slowly, and it was turn 2. It was turn 2, and in that game, it's a curve game. There's only like 1 or 2 things you can do on turn 2, and he was just sitting there thinking forever, and I had to be like, hey man, come on, like this is still timed. Again, if it's that pivotal turn where you're trying to figure out how you don't die because your opponent has lethal on board, that's one thing. I understand taking more time on a turn like that, but on some of those early turns, you should be thinking about what you're going to do while your opponent is playing. I have met some players who don't do that, who aren't even considering what their next turn is, and then they start thinking about it when they get to their turn and draw their cards. Oh, well, what do I want to do this turn? Like, you should already be having an idea of like, okay, if they do this, I'm going to do this. Here's my plan. It will change if they do X, etc. So just be cognizant. No one wants to go to time. No one wants to get a double loss, which is a very harsh penalty in Final Fantasy. So just be cognizant of the time rules and do not be afraid to call a judge or to first just tell your opponent, hey man, I don't want either of us to go to time. Can we please play a little faster? It's okay to do that. And number 8, my favorite number, be very clear with your communication, particularly when you're going through your steps. I always find it enjoyable to see everyone's different play patterns. There are some people who are so by the book, they will call out everything. I've seen them go, okay, active phase, activate all cards, draw phase, draw 2 for turn, main phase. And for me, that's excessive. Like, I don't need to know all of that. Yes, you have to draw for turn every turn. You don't need to announce that to me. I know that's happening. So personally, how I play, I will announce the important things. So I automatically activate, I automatically draw 2 because no one can interfere with that. And then in my main phase, I clearly play out whatever characters, announce their abilities. Okay, play Edgar. Here are my 2 targets for the Edgar effect. And then give them a second to respond. And the big one is attack phase. Announce when you're going to combat. So let's say you don't have anything main phase 1, you're ready to go. Say, all right, move to combat, or move to attack phase. And because if you have something you want to do before they move to attack phase, that's your chance to respond. Okay, hold on. Before you go to combat, I'm going to do this effect. And do not let people rush over the phases. You are given priority in every one of those phases, and they can't skip those. And I've seen players do that who have drawn 2 cards that are clearly in their main phase and will just go, okay, attack with this guy. And it's like, whoa, like pump the brakes there. I get a chance to respond before you even get into the attack phase. And I've seen some players get upset that they've revealed some effect they're going to do, but it's like, okay, but that's on you. You rushed through the phases. They don't get to skip those. So if you have something you want to do at the start of attack phase, during the main phase, you still get to do that. They can't rush through that. So the way I do it, I'll always announce, all right, move to combat. And I'll wait like 2 seconds. Beat, do this thing. Now, the other thing too is being an active opponent. That's a real thing. Be an active opponent. If your opponent is giving you clear openings like that, I would like to move to combat. Acknowledge them. Say, yes, that's fine. Or, let me think before you do that. Don't just sit there silently and then they proceed thinking everything's okay. And you're like, well, hold on, I wanted to do something. Like, you do need to be an active participant in the game as well. Tell people before you exit combat, before you pass your turn. So those are the big ones I'll usually do is moving to combat, main phase 2, and I'll say, okay, go to end step, or I'll just say pass the turn. An opponent can then say, okay, before you pass your turn, I would like to do this thing. No problem. Just be clear. Be very clear with each other. Again, no one wants to get into that situation where you rushed right into combat before the other person and then maybe they were shy, so they didn't say anything, but you have to be an active participant too. If you know, okay, when they go to combat, I'm going to Amaterasu, whatever that start a turn trigger is, just make sure that's very clear. So usually a lot of that is skipped over in the earlier parts of the game, which is totally fine, because if we're just taking turns back up, pass, yeah, you don't need to announce, okay, main phase 1, exit main phase 1, entering combat, start of combat prep, going to make, yeah. To me, that's excessive, but as long as you're announcing the key important parts, I think that's totally fair. And those are my tips to have a good, fun, and hopefully successful time at a tournament. I wish everyone luck who is going to all these tournaments. I hope you have good success, unless, of course, you're facing me, then I hope you don't have success. No, it's funny. A lot of times people will say before a game, good luck, which I always find a little strange, because, of course, I don't want you to have good luck against me. I want to win. Why would I want you to have good luck to me? But if my opponent says good luck, I'll say same to you. I'll return the favor. I don't usually go out of my way to say it first, though, because, yeah, why would I want you to have good luck? I want to win. You should want to win, too. Unless you're just having to have fun, and then I very much envy you. So come say hi if you see me there. I am currently scheduled for Chicago, and I'll be doing a bunch of the local qualifiers around Missouri, Illinois, just because, again, that's close to where I live in St. Louis. And beyond that, I hope you have a good time. Good luck with your building. I'm excited to see what people play. I'm excited to see how things shape up. Hope to see some of you there. Hope these tips were helpful. If you have any other helpful tips that you find really help you on the day of big tournaments, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear them. And thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care.